Hi, this is Prike Sam with this episode of Liberal Working Abroad Show. Welcome to This World This Week, where we're keeping you updated, and we might get a bit topical, a bit local on this. But what Prike does is give advice to expats living and working abroad, primarily from a UK base, into the EU. Our EU office is in Cyprus, which has got the great attribute of being in the Eastern Mediterranean, very sunny island, uh, with the British forces base here and a long and history of association with the UK and internationally, with a whole mix of different people and expats living here already from China, Russia, UK, and Europe. However, it's been caught up in the Middle East for a couple of different reasons, and we'll look at those today. I was going to talk today about how the EU doesn't work. It's the economic mess that tried to amalgamate all the 27 countries in the EU into one economic cycle rhythm doesn't work. It leaves countries like major players like France in an economic mess as opposed to be living and working with relatively high taxes. However, the long-term president has come out with a real gem in the last week when he said that if a country and if its people need to be safe, they need to be feared. It's not just about being politically correct. It's not just about what the letter of the law is. You have to be feared. You have to have an opposite position. Now, fear is maybe a bit too of an emotional word, but you've got to have positional authority to be able to influence and make the changes that you want, whether you're a parent, a boss, or whether you're a country asserting the right of its individuals. So what we've seen this week is obviously a bit disturbing from a British perspective. The British have got a sovereign forces base. That means it's British land in Cyprus, just like Chagos, just like Gibraltar, except that uh, their government and the leadership is completely inept. Just after Donald Trump came into power, Cyprus was finally admitted as an associate member of NATO. Now, for those of you who don't know the history of Cyprus, it's a split island. Since 1974, there's been a northern Cyprus territory which is administered from Turkey, but it's not an internationally recognised separate location. What they are trying to do is get a settlement of that. The EU have tried that as long ago as 2004 when they allowed the Republic, the southern Cyprus, into the EU. But then everything went wrong and the island wasn't unified by the negotiation and the influences of the EU since 2004. Trump is having more of a say now as he goes about his version of peace and diplomacy around the world, reconciling the issues in Syria. Now, they have lost in the last year a long-term dictatorship, which was a family oligarch went from one family to the next. That family's gone now from Syria, becoming a democratic country, a country which people don't need to flee from, that they can live safely and comfortably going into their future. We see that Lebanon is being fixed, despite the Iranian-backed proxy guerrilla groups there, as well as Gaza. Now, when there's armed conflict, there's never a winner. There's always losers, and there's nothing good can come from war and conflict. But that fear has to be there to stop the conflict in the first place. And a government and an army does that by building up its munitions and building up its forces. And so that's what Iran is trying to do. And attacking them unilaterally, is that a bad thing? Well, here goes, Mr. Keir Starmer. Get your facts right. starting a war without any good reason is one thing, but the government in Iran have been saying for years that they seek to destroy um, Jews in Europe. They've been disrupting Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Lebanon, distracting those places and making them not settled places to live in. So if I threaten to kill somebody, if you threaten to kill somebody, if you threaten violence or action or sabre rattling in any way, that is a public offence. We found that out in England when there was a social media uproar to Southport children going to dancing classes that were murdered. Those people were put in prison. They were put in prison for a few years because they publicly threatened or accused other people of being illegal, violent, and they should be treated to long prison sentences or even, hanged. Now, when the Iranians are doing that, and excuse me, Hezbollah, if you go on the internet, you can see that they're still advertising now for freedom fighters, suicide brothers to come along and volunteer to protect the country of Iran. Who are they asking? Who are they asking? Already we've got Iranians fleeing across the land border into Turkey. Turkey is not in the EU. It would like to be, but part of Turkey is in Europe. If you're in Turkey, you can drive all the way up to Sweden. You can drive up through East Europe or Germany or France, get to Denmark, go through Denmark, and it's a bridge to Sweden. You can drive all the way. And isn't this where Asian migrants are coming from, asylum seekers are coming from? They're making the long path from the Middle East through Turkey into the East European borders. The East European countries allowing them to pass and then catch a boat across into England. That's illegal, that's criminal action. So a good lawyer would take action against that. But the British government choose not to. They choose to allow those criminal actions of those asylum seekers against a proxy war or real war to continue to go into the UK. So Mr. Trump has chosen to call those people out, to call out the people that are instigating this instability that affects the whole of Europe, the whole of Eastern Europe, the whole of the Middle East, with people losing their homes, losing their safety, and fleeing as a result, for good reason or for bad reason, with criminals profiting from that, some of those criminals being in government and in power, profiting from that, and he's allowing that to be dealt with now with what is a state that has sponsored terrorism throughout the Middle East and the instability and the wars that have resulted from that. Nobody's perfect, there's lots of history, lots of opinions, but the approach of the British government to protect its people around the world and its sovereign territory in Cyprus is pretty mealy-mouthed and soft, and directly opposite to that. The Cypriot government are disturbed by that, but straight away they get support from the Greeks, from the French, from everybody but the British. The British will come later, sooner or later. You have to believe that behind the scenes, the British were advised that this might happen, and Keir Starmer has chosen to take a neutral step. Not good enough. It's not good enough for a strong country. Not good enough for British expats living around the world. And unfortunately for Keir Starmer, we have democratic elections in the UK. So watch our Living and Working Abroad show. For expats living and working abroad, we show you how to consider and what to do when you considering going back to the UK and how that might affect your residency living and working abroad. Thanks a lot for watching. Contact us at ProPartnership.com.